speaker today. So Jeremy's a trained theoretical physicist who studied at ENS Paris-Saclay at Marseille University, where he completed a PhD in 2018 on mathematical formulations of gauge theories. Wow, this is some clever stuff.
I'm not
During
going to
his
talk about that. Don't
Very
worry.
fair, but that's his background. And yeah, during his doctoral training, developed a strong interest in critical theory, epistemology, um, and philosophy of science. Um, yeah, so his research bridges physics and the social sciences with particular attention to analytical sociology. Um, so yes, just one reminder before we start, and I pass over to you, Jeremy. Please do remember that there's certain rules in this space. Elliot's just put a message in the chat. We want to respect each other. Um, you know, hopefully it doesn't need saying, but it's always important to say it anyway. So do respect, treat each other with respect and sort of abide by these principles in the chat. Um, so without further ado, Jeremy, I'll pass over to you. Thank you so much for giving
Thank
this
you.
talk.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, to be more precise, I am a physicist by training, but now I am a philosopher of science, and I have a postdoctoral position. I am a postdoc researcher in philosophy of science and epistemology. So I'm not doing theoretical physics anymore. I'm doing more like epistemology, which means the the theories underlying the justification of knowledge, and more precisely the justification of scientific knowledge. So it's also the critical view that we can have on scientific knowledge by asking how this knowledge is supposed to be justified and so on. And during my PhD in philosophy of science, I studied also social science and the epistemology of social science because I was not trained in social science, and I took this occasion as an excuse to learn things about social science as well. But I am also part of the Cortex, which is a collective, a French collective promoting let's say, scientific reasoning and critical thinking. So it's a kind of collective, uh, which at the beginning um, was aimed at creating a kind of network of teachers and researchers interested on a pedagogical point of view as well about critical thinking, which means asking questions like what is critical thinking, but mostly how to teach critical thinking. Does it mean something to teach critical thinking to others? So it was the basic, let's say, tenets of the collective more than 50 years ago now, 15 years ago. There is a website as well, unfortunately only in French, with a lot of different topics, like pedagogical sequences, concrete practical sequences, but also some more theoretical papers and articles like, for instance, why do we want to teach critical thinking? You know, teaching and promoting critical thinking is something you cannot criticize. It's everyone agree. Everyone agrees that we have to be more critical and so on, but no one really knows what does it mean. So our articles are also about that kind of critical view, a meta-critical view of what we are doing in some sense. Okay, so in this talk, I will talk about, it's quite short, so I have to make, of course, decisions, and I will talk about misinformation and disinformation on a more meta way, in the sense that I will try to frame the problem in a certain way, uh, and I will not I have no time to share like practical tools, so that's why I wanted to take a step back, but you are going to understand what I mean. So first I would like to do an introductory warm-up, let's say. Okay, and this is going to be solved in a breakout room. So it's a kind of puzzle, okay? It's a kind of puzzle. I give you the puzzle, and then maybe someone can make the breakout rooms in, I don't know, we are not a lot actually, so maybe two breakout rooms, let's say two. It's okay because we need enough people. So maybe two rooms, and in the rooms you discuss with each other and you try to converge to a certain solution. Okay. So here the kind of, yeah, the puzzle. You have a set of cards, okay, and the cards have two sides, and you see that side. So a card with D, another with 4, another with 7, and another with K. And you want to you have, let's say, a theory about this deck of cards, which is that behind each D there is an even number. You don't know if it's true, okay, but it's a statement that you have, and you want to test this statement. You want to test it, and the question is, of course, you could turn over all the cards, but the question is, which two cards must absolutely be turned over to test this statement? Okay, is it clear? So please go in some breakout rooms and try to solve this, and then in maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes we can gather again. I think there is only one room. I don't know if it's. Can you hear me, Chris? Or
Yes, I think Elliot set them up. I think we've had a few people just left. So I think I mean why don't we just have I think we should just have the discussion here, to be honest.
yeah, now we can have the discussion here if we are
Cool.
not so much. Yes, so many.
Cool.
So what do you think? Yeah, someone?
Nadia, would you like to give it a go?
I think it's got to be D and 7, right?
DN7, you think? Why?
Because we've got to check what's behind the D and see if it's an even number. The 4, it doesn't matter if there's a D on the other side, but the 7, if there's a D on the side, then the statement is false.
Yeah, that's right. So intuitively, when you ask people individually, they tend to answer D and 4.
Yeah, that was definitely my first thought.
Now, yeah, that was your first intuition, right? And what I wanted to show, but unfortunately there is no enough people. But what I wanted to show is when you put people together and you make them thinking, then they converge to the right and counterintuitive solution. So you're right, it's the D and 7 because the 4 is useless. If you turn over the 4 and that there is not a D, you don't care because the statement doesn't say that it should have a D on the side of every even number. It's the other way around. So that's called the wasn't task. Sorry, the wasn't task. And here are some results of research in cognitive psychology of the wasn't task. When the wasn't task is solved individually, you have like 9%, 21%, around 10 to 20% of people who are succeeding. So most of them are fail to resolve this task. And when you put people in groups, then you have a majority of the groups, a large majority of the groups that that solve the problem. And when you ask people after that, most of them agree on the right solution, much more than individually. So that's my introduction, because what I wanted to say is that the right way to see how we reason is to understand that the human reason, is only effective collectively. It's called the interactionist view or theory of reason by Dan Sperber and Hugo Mercier, which is summarized in the Enigma of Reason, for instance. The reason is suboptimal when you are using it in isolation. We are very skilled, we are very good at finding arguments that justify our own positions. If we have an intuition, a belief which is forming in our mind, we are very good at finding arguments that justify our own positions, which is called the my side bias or the confirmation bias sometimes. We are very good at finding counter arguments against positions we disagree with. If we are facing an opinion or a position that goes against what we think or what we believe, we are very good to create and to form counter arguments. But we are very poor at finding counter arguments against our own positions. So if you try, I mean, this is independent of the cognitive skills. Even if you have good cognitive skills, you will just be better at finding more arguments for your own positions. But it's not cognitive skills that we need, it's metacognitive skills. Skills of cognitive skills about the way we are reasoning. And the best way to do that is to do that collectively, because reason is actually working very really better when individuals debate together under some conditions. And one of the conditions is that there is a diversity on opinions. In that case, the cognitive work can be effectively divided. You can divide the cognitive work effectively if you are with other people who are different opinions than you, different beliefs and so on, and you manage to create a space of debate. So it's quite intuitive at the end. But sometimes when we hear people saying that we need more critical thinking, most of the time they are saying that individuals need more critical thinking, which is also true, of course. But the best way to be a good critical thinker, the best way to do that is to do that collectively. So that's more or less the take-home message of all my talk. But now I will more focus on misinformation, of course. But keep in mind that more or less the best thing we can do is confront our ideas, confront our opinions, talk to each other, and talk to different people, mostly. So the difference between misinformation and disinformation is not necessarily always clear, but in a kind of ideal way, we can distinguish both by saying that disinformation is a kind of misinformation, but with bad intention. Okay, if we intend to mislead, for instance, with an intention to mislead. Whereas misinformation can happen even by good faith. You are believing something which is wrong, for instance, and you are just sharing the information, what you think is an accurate information, but at least actually it's not. So that's the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Of course, it's much more complicated than that, because sometimes you can, depending on how you frame the problem, depending on how you frame the problem, you can say true things, but which leads to a kind of misleading conclusions, even with just true things. Okay, so of course it's not so clear than that. There is someone in the waiting room. Okay. So the way I'm going to frame the problem to take a step back is the following one. Misinformation and disinformation produces some outcomes and effects by some psychosocial mechanisms that are quite complicated, as we are going to see. And these outcomes and effects, we see them as not desirable. So that's the thing. If you want to fight against misinformation or disinformation, it's because we think that it has some outcomes, some collective, individual, social, political outcomes that we don't want. Okay, so that's why we need to. So now from this frame, there is a given way to answer the question, to ask the question of why to fight against disinformation. In order to be able to answer that question, we first need to answer an underlying question, implicit question, which is what effects does misinformation produce? And what are the social and the psychological mechanisms involved? Because if we are wrong about the actual mechanisms or the actual effects of misinformation, then we are going to fight inefficiently. Okay. And now how to fight, I will quickly go on this at the end of my talk. But of course, it's impossible to to summarize all in so short time, but at least we can take a step back and at least identify 3 leverage points at the individual, at the collective, and at the institutional level to fight against this threat. So how does it work? How does misinformation work? A widely publicized thesis that we can hear often in the medias, but which is actually a bit wrong, as we are going to see, is the following one. The following one is the received view, if you want. The information market on the internet, the first premise of the reasoning is that the information market on the internet is unregulated. Okay, there is in the sense that anyone can post anything right or wrong on the internet. It's unregulated. The second premise is that the content that is not epistemically warranted is overrepresented. What does it mean, non-epistemically warranted? It's a technical term to say wrong or false or misleading, if you want, or not really well founded on a empirically, theoretically, scientifically basis, for instance. So the content that is not epistemically warranted is overrepresented because the people that hold this kind of content, this kind of beliefs, are really over motivated to represent it on the internet, to talk about it, to share information. So that's the publicized thesis, right? And then the conclusion is that this structure of the online information market, combined with our intrinsic cognitive functioning, the fact that we prefer information that confirm our beliefs and so on, or we prefer the dramatic information rather than positive ones, and so on, push us to believe more false things, for instance. So that's the publicized thesis of how misinformation works. In France, for instance, we have Gérald Bronner, which is a representative of this view, of this thesis of how misinformation or disinformation is working. Unfortunately, this view is as well misleading, actually. So that's a kind of meta misinformation. Actually, it's not working like that. There is no really strong or solid empirical data supporting this thesis. I have no space, of course, to summarize all the reason for that, but I can advise you this very good book, Not Born Yesterday, by Hugo Mercier, which makes a synthesis of the of how much we are not gullible. Actually, we are not gullible. Any of us. We are always processing information on a kind of rational way, and of course, sometimes we are biased, but it's quite complicated to make us change our mind. It's very it's very complicated to make change to manipulate people, and the propaganda which works is actually the propaganda that rests on something that is already there. If the people are not racist, it's very hard to make them racist. If they have some reasons to be a bit xenophobic, then it's much more easy to make them more racist. But you need something, you need this to be already there in some sense. I will go into some details, don't worry. So why does misinformation doesn't work like that? So at least I can give you three counter arguments. The first one is that uh, it's actually a kind of marginal phenomenon in the sense that most people on the internet doesn't share fake news. Most people on the internet share right founded news or just true things, but most of them are not sharing fake news. For there are even papers that wonder why people share so few fake news actually. So when you have a look to the literature in psychology, in sociology, in political science, the empirical literature about that, you see you realize that when the researchers try to quantify more or less the phenomenon, it turns out that just a few agents, few people are spreading fake news, and most of them have no power, have no, let's say, audience. Of course, it's much more important when, uh, let's say, trustful figures are or authority figures are sharing fake news, for instance, governments or the mainstream medias. So that's the fake news, let's say, that are the most harmful are the fake news shared by the governments or by the mainstream media. But the fake news spread, the most of them, which is spread on the internet, have no particular effect. Or if they have an effect, they have an effect on people that already have good reasons to adhere to these beliefs. The second one, maybe, which is the most important, and which is actually a bit counterintuitive as well. The second one is that the fact to be exposed to something which is wrong or to an information does not entail that you are going to believe it. Because you are not dumb. We are not dumb. We are processing the information. And when we believe, when we adhere right away to a new information, it's probably because we already believe that, or we already have intuitions that this could be true. But if you are exposed to something which is completely against your opinion, completely against your daily life experience, it will maybe not have a very large effect on you. Which is even more counterintuitive is the fact that when you share something which is wrong, or when you share something on the internet, for instance, on the social media, doesn't mean neither that you are believing that it's true. You can share it for a lot of different reasons. Of course, you can sharing for uh, uh, advertising reason, but you can also sharing because you don't have time. You react because the algorithm and the social medias are made to make you behaving like this, to make you sharing information that you like without taking time to think. But if you take time to think, then you will be able to distinguish um, between things, between news. Um, and also the last, let's say, counter argument that we can have is that the online information market, even if it's unregulated, is actually highly structured in the sense that the audience is not distributed the same way over all the people that can share things. If tomorrow I create a blog and I start writing bullshit about I don't know why, I have no audience, you know. Okay, so even if I can do that, it doesn't mean that I will do that, and it doesn't mean that if I do that, a lot of people are going to see that, to see it. So the structure of the online information market is more or less the same as the mainstream media market. The medias online that have the biggest audience are the same as the biggest media outline in some sense. So here's some reference. So in a summary, the internet is an unregulated market. That's right. Anyone can publish anything. The truth of information is not a criterion for publication, but however, the true information is also accessible. You can also easily access. Uh, and then you actively seek to justify your intuitive beliefs. It's very difficult to change them from the outside, which means that if you are confronted with information, doesn't mean that you are going to accept it. If you accept it, it's probably that you already believe that it's true, or you already, it comes to comfort something that you already have. So misinformation seems to be much more a problem of demand than a problem of supply. Then on the other hand, of course, you have the possibility to connect with specialists. And at the end, you have two contradictory phenomena, misinformation or disinformation, and also the access to reliable information. And it's very hard to say in general that one is going to win over the other. And empirically, at least at that time, today, of course, it may evolve. It's knowledge, you know, so it's evolving all the time. But so far, it's very hard to say that there is any evidence that the unregulated internet increases misinformation compared to accurate information, and also compared to what happened outside the internet. In your social life, you are always confronting your ideas. You are not confronting your ideas in the sense that in your social life, in your real social life, you are hanging out with people that are very close to you, very homogeneous to you. So it's not only a question of algorithms. Of course, algorithms make you stay on the platform the most of the time. So it will show you, the algorithm is going to show you things that you tend to love, that you tend to like. But outside, it's already a thing. You are hanging out with your friends, and your friends are more probably very homogeneous to you on an ideological, political point of view. So we are already in a kind of bubble filter in the real life. So it's not a question of internet or not. So just to summarize again, the view of how disinformation is working, which is quite kind of naive, can be represented like this. You have some information. We are exposed randomly to some information that can be more or less reliable. This information is going to influence our beliefs we form about a topic, a given topic. The beliefs can be more or less founded, more or less sound, and that beliefs then may influence our behaviors, practice, and so on. That can be more or less efficient. I take an example. For instance, if you want to heal yourself with a certain medicine, you are going to be exposed to disinformation about medicine that is working. Actually, it's not. This information is going to change your beliefs. You think that this medicine is efficient, whereas it's not. And this belief is going to change your behavior, which means that you are going to take this medicine, whereas it's not the best thing to do in your state. So that's the linear, naive view of how it works. And when we talk about critical thinking, when we talk about educational level, we have the idea that we educational level and critical thinking can improve the way new information will make you update your beliefs, and the way your beliefs will be aligned to your behaviors, or the behaviors will be aligned to your beliefs. But actually, as I said, and as it is written and explained, of course, in the different references I gave you, of course, I don't have time to go into details, but a better view, a view which is better founded on an empirical point of view, which means like from political science, from sociology, from psychological science, is actually the following. Actually, you have beliefs and behaviors, and both influence each other. In the sense of that, of course, if you have some beliefs, then you can adapt your behavior in order to reach a certain objective. But the other way around, in the sense that if you have some behaviors, for instance, if you are using this medicine in your family, you have always used this medicine, you don't really know why you are using this medicine, just you are using it. It's the custom of the family. Okay. Then if some people are going to ask you why you are using this medicine, you are going to defend yourself, and you are going to search for information that justify the fact that you are using this medicine. And then you will go and you will find justifications, and you will form beliefs that rationalize the behavior. So the behavior can be coherent with your beliefs, but there is also the other way around. You are going to form some beliefs to justify and to rationalize the behaviors that you have. And these behaviors and these beliefs depends on external things. For instance, they depend on the cultural and the educational context in which you have been grown, your material conditions of existence, your psychological predispositions, your life experience, and so on and so on. And of course, there is no single model that can summarize everything and that can explain everything. And then from that, you are going to search for information. You are going to actively search for information that justify your beliefs and that justify your practices and your behaviors. It's not the other way around. It's not like we are randomly exposed to some information. We are not. We are going to search actively for the information that justify what we are believing and our political opinions. And there's opinions, there's intuitions about the world, the behavior that we have depends actually on rational grounds, of course, but most of them depends on things that we cannot control, the cultural and our educational context, our material conditions of existence, and so on and so on and so on. For instance, I gave you another example. For instance, if you are in a job in the countryside and you have no possibility but to take your car, you cannot use public transport because they are not efficient, because they are not existent, and you have to take your car. In the same times, on the media, you hear a lot about climate change in a kind of culpabilization frame, At the end, the probability that if you are exposed to global warming deniers, the probability that you are going to adhere to the discourse is very high. You tend to, if someone, to summarize, if someone comes and say global warming is a hoax, it's just an excuse to make you pay more tax, then maybe this will make sense to you. So you are going to adhere to this belief because it makes sense of what you are doing on a daily life. It's wrong. You are wrong to believe that on a rational way, on an objective way, but you are right to believe this on the subjective way, because you don't have you cannot use your bike, you cannot use train because there is no train, you cannot use public transport because there is no public transport. So at the end, you are constrained by external factors, and these external factors are going to make you more prompt to believe to some discourse. And again, this discourse is going to win on the cognitive market because they benefit from the material conditions in which we are. So it's the other way around. It's completely the other way around. It's not like we are exposed to information, we are gullible, and then we are doing bullshit. No, no, no. It's the other way around. And so then the critical thinking is not only about, is also about, of course, how to update our beliefs, given some information, given some data, and so on. Of course it is. But it's maybe mainly about getting aware of this dependence, of this causal dependence. And on the dependence we don't necessarily have access to and have control to. And again, the best thing to do is to do it collectively, to be aware of this dependence, to be aware of the fact that even if we are certain that our political beliefs we have are objectively founded and are rationally founded, actually, it's probably not the case, in the sense that most of the political opinions that we have them because we belong to a certain political group. And we adhere to the whole discourse of the political group because we want to satisfy the psychological need of belonging to a group. And that's okay. I mean, it's not a problem. It's like this that we work. But critical thinking is much more about thinking about the way we are forming these beliefs, and the way this belief depends on a lot of things that we don't have control on. Even if we want to rationalize this, actually we don't have control about that. So then, to finish, we have some leverage points to fight against this. And we can identify like 3 levels. Of course, we have the first level, the individual level. You can develop critical thinking skills and dispositions. We can learn how to fact check and cross check the sources, of course. You can how to assess the credibility of the sources, how to detect if it's artificial intelligence created, and so on. These are tools that are fundamental, that are very important to access, to master. But we also need some metacognition skills, which means a kind of self-regulation, the fact to be able to watch ourselves thinking and to resist sometimes the urge to share some information just because the information justify our opinions. Because it's very, very easy to react and to be critical thinker when the information refutes our opinions. It's very difficult to do it when the information is aligned with our opinions. So the best way to do that is to do it collectively with a diverse group of people. Because again, even with good faith, even if we are honest, even if we think we are objective, we always tend to find justifications to our beliefs. So we need to confront our ideas to others. And one condition for this process to be efficient is diversity. We need social, cognitive, and ideological diversity to a certain extent, of course. To a certain extent, we need also ideological diversity. This is essential to this collective process. You cannot do it on your own. I mean, you can, but it's going to be probably misleading. And on the institutional level, you have, I'm not a specialist of that, but we can imagine some regulation process about the media, for instance. So of course, if we have media that are only based on profit, they are going to play the game. If the game is that, they are going to play the game. So reliability, which takes time, which is complex. It's not like causal fact. It's not only like one factor that explains everything. It's quite complex and so on. It takes time, reliability, against fast profit logic. Of course, if the rules of the games are fast profit logic in a competitive way, then the medias are going to play the game. And even if they don't play the game by a kind of natural selection, the medias that survive are the one that plays the game, right? So of course, this competitive context may have maybe some benefit, but they also tend um, to prefer profit against reliability. So it's not only a question, what I mean is like, it's not only a question of what we want at the individual level, it's also what we have access to. Even if you are a good critical thinker, the best critical thinker of the life of the world, then if the market is full of bullshit, then you cannot do anything. Of course, some pressure against like big tech companies about the algorithm regulations. We know how hard it is because even if there are fines, the fines are peanuts for them. For Google and so on, they even if it's hundreds of millions of dollars, it's like it's what they earn in not even a day, so they don't really care about this kind of regulation. So that's also a very big question. I don't have an answer. I think there is no like simple and definitive answer on that. And of course, we need also more power to individuals and more power to people because it turns out that democracy in political science, they show that democracy actually improves self-educational skills in the population, not the other way around. Often we hear about anti-democratic movement, and also us, we can have this kind of intuition, this kind of anti-democratic intuition to say, yeah, okay, let's give power to people, but are we ready? Are we enough educated to take good decisions and so on and so on? And actually, it works the other way around. If you give power to people, they are going to spend time to educate themselves. They are going to spend. It's something which is empirically which that you see empirically in the studies. People are going to educate themselves to take better decisions. Maybe, of course, not all of them, but more of them compared to a situation when they don't have power. Because if you don't have power, then you are not going to pay the cost, the to learn, to take time. It doesn't, I mean, why to take time to learn if it doesn't benefit to you? If you like to learn something, you are going to do it. But if you have do other things to do, you are not going to learn and to educate yourself and to discuss and to talk to experts and so on. Because at the end, it doesn't change anything. If you don't have the power, it doesn't change anything. So it works actually the other way around. So to improve our fight against misinformation, more power to people is one of the possible of the possible direction as well. Okay, thank you very much. We were not many of us, but I hope it was interesting and understandable.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
Jeremy. Yeah, no, it's just really, really, really interesting and really interesting. And like, I think that the way it drastically, the output, with regards to misinformation changes when it's done collectively is so interesting, so useful and important to know. Especially like in a space like this where we're talking about movements, where we're talking about, social justice and things like that. So I think that's so interesting and really, really key. And also the benefit of this is obviously this will be recorded. This has been recorded and, this will be shared around.
Yeah, sure.
So there's, this will reach a much larger audience than people have attended. And obviously having 5 different stages, having talks at the same times, obviously means that depending on which one starts first, you're going to get different attendance. So
Of course,
this
of
is
course.
yeah, so this is really this will be shared around, so that's really good. So before we go, I just want to share this in the chat for the people who are here. These are our links to our to some more events in this festival, some donations. So if you donate, it will go to the variety of organisations and speakers who have spoken today. And yeah, so we've got
And the resources?
and the resources as well. So we've got the resources will take you to the locations and contact details
Okay,
of anybody who's
perfect.
spoken and the websites and whatnot, that kind of stuff. Elliot, you have a point.
Hi, Jeremy. Sorry, I don't have great
Hi.
connection, so let me know if you can't hear me. But I actually had a quick question, if that's okay. Um,
Yeah.
I
Do you mind
wanted
if
to
I
ask.
head off first? Is
I
that all
thought it was
right?
really interesting what you said about. Yeah, no worries, Chris.
Is that right? I've got to just, sorry to run, Jeremy. I've got to host the next session in this room afterwards. So this can stay open, but
Okay,
it's just,
bye-bye.
yeah. And thank you so much again for
Thank you.
this. Really appreciate it. All right. See you guys.
Bye. Bye-bye. So yes, Elliot?
Um, yeah, I'll also need to head off in a second, but I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about so like obviously about how a diversity of views enables people to encounter counterpoints that they wouldn't themselves kind of have access to or bring up. And that made us, but then obviously there's also research that people encountering information that contradicts their prior held beliefs sometimes leads to them to like entrenching that prior held belief. I'm wondering what you think, like what you think about like that interaction, like what explains that mechanism.
So if I understood well, the the effect of diversity in the group, I in the well in this I can go in yeah, I think it's in this paper. In this paper, they what it's kind of synthesis, but the literature in psychology or sociology and so on, the literature is very wide. It's very yeah, and what they show is that, of course, in this kind of puzzle, um, maybe most of the people are changing their mind because they don't really care. I mean, the wasn't task is not a politically or morally laden affirmation. So at the end, they don't really care if it's true or wrong. And maybe it doesn't work the same for political or or moral topics. Um, Actually, it's also work for topics like when you make people discuss about a topic which is morally, ethically, or politically laden. And the result is not that they are converging on the same opinion, which is quite good as well, because democracy is not the consensus. Democracy is the peacefully management of dissensus, right? So that's the fact, yeah. And it turns out that